My name is Claire Whitaker. I'm 24 years old, and for most of my life, I thought being the second twin meant I had to be twice as good just to be noticed once. I got the better grades. I worked the longer shifts. I earned scholarships, skipped spring breaks, and saved every birthday check I ever got because I learned early that nobody was coming to rescue me. But there was one thing I thought was untouchable. The wedding fund my parents always said belonged to both of us. They talked about it like it was proof they loved us equally, like one day when it was my turn to walk down the aisle, I would finally get something that had my name on it too. Then I found out the truth. Most of that money was gone before I ever had a fiancé, before I ever chose a dress, before I ever even got to dream about the kind of wedding I wanted. It had been poured into my twin sister's perfect celebration, the kind with ocean views, expensive flowers, matching bridesmaid robes, and photos my mother proudly posted like she had just bought herself a trophy. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself money was just money. But the night my mother looked me in the eye and demanded the little that was left, plus the savings I had built on my own, something inside me went completely still. I did not scream. I did not beg. I just finally understood that in that house, my future had always been considered optional. And when I refused, my mother said the words that ended whatever family I thought I still had. Before I tell you what she called me and what happened after I packed my bags with a smile instead of tears, tell me this. What time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious how far this story will travel. Thanksgiving dinner that year was the kind of night people love to pretend is warm. The turkey was slightly dry. The mashed potatoes were sitting in a big ceramic bowl. Football was playing low in the living room, and everyone acted like we were some normal Ohio family that took pictures, passed rolls, and said what we were thankful for without choking on the truth. I sat at the end of the table, the same place I always sat, listening to my mother praise my twin sister Madison like she had personally invented marriage. Madison was 10 minutes older than me, and somehow those 10 minutes had become the foundation of an entire family religion. She got the better bedroom growing up, the better birthday gifts, the expensive summer camps, the college help, the dress my mother cried over, and eventually the wedding fund I had been told was for both of us. I did not say anything during dinner. I had learned that silence was usually cheaper than honesty in that house. After dessert, when the plates were stacked and my father was half watching the game from his recliner, my mother called me into the kitchen. Her voice had that fake, soft tone she used when she had already decided what I was going to give up. Madison followed her in, holding her phone like she was waiting for approval to record a celebration. My mother leaned against the counter and said Madison and her husband were looking at houses. Not someday. Now. She said they had found a beautiful place near a good neighborhood, the kind of starter home that would help them build a real future. I remember almost laughing, because apparently my future had never needed building. Then she said they were short on the down payment, and since there was still a little left in the wedding fund, I should be mature enough to let Madison use it. I asked her if she meant the wedding fund that was supposed to belong to both of us. My mother's face tightened. She said Madison was already married, so her needs were more immediate. I said her wedding had already eaten most of that account. My mother corrected me like I was being rude at a business meeting. She said it was not eaten. It was invested in family happiness. Then came the part I did not expect, even from her. She said my personal savings would help cover the rest. The money I had made from part-time jobs, graduation gifts I never spent, overtime shifts, and the emergency fund I had built because I did not trust anyone else to protect me. I stared at her and asked if she was serious. Madison finally looked up from her phone and said it would only be a loan, but the way she said it made it clear she had already spent it in her head. My mother added that I did not have a husband, a mortgage, or real responsibilities yet. I told her I had responsibilities to myself. I said I was not giving Madison the last of the wedding fund, and I was definitely not handing over the savings I had built from my own work. The kitchen went quiet. Even the sounds from the TV seemed to fade. My mother's face changed in a way I will never forget. She was not disappointed. She was offended, like I had stolen something from her by refusing to be stolen from. She stepped closer, pointed at me, and snapped, "You ungrateful brat." Madison did not defend me. My father did not come in. Nobody said my name like I mattered. My mother told me that if I cared so much about my own money, I could care about my own roof too. She said I had until morning to leave. I looked at her, then at Madison, then at the kitchen where I had spent years cleaning up after people who never cleaned up the damage they made in me. And instead of crying, I smiled. Not because it was funny, because something inside me had finally locked into place. I said, "Okay, don't regret this." My mother rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Madison gave this little breathy laugh, like she thought I would apologize before sunrise. But I went upstairs, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and started packing the life they had never valued. By midnight, I had texted a friend in Chicago, booked a morning bus ticket, and transferred every dollar I had into an account only I could access. The last thing I packed was a framed photo from college, not because I wanted the memory, but because I wanted proof that I had survived that house before I left it for good. I arrived in Chicago with 2 suitcases, a tired phone battery, and the kind of fear that feels almost like freedom when you have nothing left to lose. My friend let me sleep on her couch in Lakeview for 3 weeks, and I spent those 3 weeks moving like a woman who knew she could not afford to collapse. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, put on the same black blazer, and applied to every corporate marketing job I could find. I rewrote my resume so many times that I started dreaming in bullet points. I searched apartments on Zillow during lunch breaks, calculated train routes like a math problem, and refused to let myself think about the fact that my own mother had kicked me out over money she had no right to demand. The first interview that changed everything was with a marketing firm downtown, in one of those glass buildings where everyone wore ID badges and walked like their calendar controlled their bloodstream. I had no family connections, no safety net, no mother calling anyone to put in a good word. I had my degree, my scholarship record, my work ethic, and a calmness that came from having already survived worse than a difficult interview. They hired me as a marketing analyst. The salary was not huge, but it was real. It came with health insurance, a 401k match, and the first feeling I ever had that my future could belong to me if I guarded it carefully. My first apartment was small enough that I could vacuum the whole place without unplugging the cord. But it was mine. I found it on Zillow after refreshing listings for days. The kitchen had old cabinets, the heater made weird noises, and the view was mostly brick. But when I signed that lease, I cried in the empty living room because nobody could threaten to throw me out of it for saying no. I bought secondhand furniture, learned which grocery stores had the best prices, and turned my tiny apartment into a place that felt safe. Not fancy. Safe. There is a difference, and I had never really known it before. At work, I became the person who stayed late when a campaign needed fixing, the person who noticed numbers other people skimmed past, the person who did not panic when executives asked hard questions. My manager noticed. Then, her manager noticed. Within 14 months, I was promoted to Brand Strategy Associate. The raise was not life-changing to anyone else, but to me, it was proof. Proof that I could build without begging. Proof that I could rise without being chosen first by my family. Proof that the daughter they called ungrateful was more responsible with money than all of them combined. I started contributing to my 401k, then built an emergency fund, then opened a separate savings account for the wedding I still hope to have someday. Not a Miami wedding, not a performance, not a stage for my mother's pride. Just something honest. Around that time, I met Ethan Brooks through a coworker's birthday dinner. He was a software engineer, quiet in a confident way, and he did something nobody in my family had ever done well. He listened. When I said I did not really talk to my family, he did not demand the full story like gossip. He just said, "Then I hope the people around you now treat you better." That sentence stayed with me longer than any compliment. We became friends first, then we became something steadier. He did not try to rescue me, and I did not need rescuing. He simply stood beside the life I was already building and respected it. Meanwhile, I heard almost nothing from Ohio. No apology, no concern, no message asking if I had found somewhere safe to stay. Sometimes I wondered if they expected me to crawl back. Sometimes I wondered if Madison got the house she wanted. But most days, I did not wonder at all. I was busy learning how to be calm, busy learning how to sleep without bracing for an insult, busy becoming someone my mother could no longer use as a spare wallet, spare daughter, or spare future. For the first time in my life, my days were not organized around being less loved than Madison. They were mine. And while I was building a life they could not touch, back in Ohio, the perfect little world they had chosen over me was already starting to crack. I did not find out all at once. That is how family disasters usually work. They do not arrive with one big announcement. They leak through old friends, half-finished texts, awkward social media posts, and relatives who think they are whispering when they are really handing you a whole timeline. The first thing I heard was that Madison's dream marriage was not as dreamy as the photos made it look. She had married Derek Langford, a mortgage broker from Florida who liked expensive watches, oceanfront restaurants, and telling people he was in real estate, even when the market was not being kind to him. Madison had treated the wedding like her official promotion into a better life. Miami venue, designer gown, welcome dinner, private photographer, floral arch, custom cocktails, and enough matching robes and gift bags to make it look like a sponsored event. My mother had acted like every dollar spent was a tribute to Madison's worth. The problem was, after the wedding ended, Madison kept living like the reception never stopped. Brunches, home decor, new clothes, weekend flights, beauty appointments, credit card charges that looked small by themselves and terrifying together. Derek was not broke, but he was not the endless bank account Madison thought she had married. He liked the image of a polished wife, but he did not like the bills that came with one. Their fight started with spending, then moved into control. He wanted to approve purchases. She wanted to be adored without limits. He wanted receipts. She wanted praise. Neither of them wanted reality. Back in Ohio, my parents were still pretending everything was fine. My mother talked about Madison like she had married into stability. She bragged about the wedding to anyone who would listen, especially at church lunches and family gatherings. She said things like, "When your daughter chooses well, you invest in her happiness." I always found that phrase funny because nobody had invested in mine. Then my father had a heart scare. It was not some dramatic movie scene. It was chest pain, tests, specialists, follow-up appointments, medication, and bills that kept arriving in envelopes thick enough to change the temperature of a room. His company insurance was not as strong as my parents had always assumed. The out-of-pocket costs were higher than expected, and the savings that should have softened the blow were mostly gone. The wedding fund had been drained for Madison. The remaining savings had been chipped away by honeymoon help, small transfers, credit card rescues, and the quiet little payments parents make when they cannot admit their favorite child is financially reckless. My mother had built her identity around Madison being the successful daughter, so she kept covering for her. A little loan here, a check there, a payment made just this once. But just this once becomes a lifestyle when nobody says no. Their house in the suburbs, the one my father used to call his greatest investment, suddenly became the only asset left. They talked about refinancing, but interest rates were not friendly, and their debt picture was not pretty. They talked about selling a car. They talked about asking relatives. What they did not talk about, at least not honestly, was how they had ended up there. Nobody wanted to say the obvious sentence. They had spent the emergency fund on Madison's image and called it love. Madison's marriage kept getting worse. She had no serious career to fall back on because she had always been told that being chosen was the same thing as being capable. Her little lifestyle content page never made real money, and the boutique job she once had was long gone. When Derek started pushing back harder, she ran to my mother, and my mother ran to the same savings accounts that were already empty. I heard that Madison cried about feeling trapped. I heard that Derek accused her of marrying him for status. I heard that my mother blamed stress, the economy, bad luck, anything except the years of teaching Madison that consequences were for other people. And through all of it, nobody called me. Not to apologize, not to explain, not to admit that the wedding fund they stole from my future had not saved Madison's. I think that was when I finally understood something important. People who use you do not always come back when they feel guilty. Sometimes they only come back when the person they chose instead becomes too expensive. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was making pasta in my Chicago apartment. I remember that because the water was boiling, my laptop was open on the counter, and Ethan had just texted asking if I wanted to look at a small wedding venue that weekend. My phone lit up with a number I had not seen in over a year. Ohio area code. My stomach knew before my brain did. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. Then a voicemail appeared. I did not play it right away. I stood there staring at my phone while steam rose from the pot, and for a second I was 20 years old again, waiting to find out which version of my family needed something from me. When I finally listened, my mother's voice sounded shaky, but not sorry. That was the first thing I noticed. She did not say she missed me. She did not ask if I was safe, happy, healthy, engaged, lonely, anything. She said there were things happening with my father's health. She said Madison was going through a very difficult time. She said the family needed to come together. Then she used the phrase that told me everything. You need to be a responsible daughter. Not loved daughter, not wronged daughter. Responsible daughter. The next morning, I called back from a conference room at work because I did not want her voice inside my apartment. She answered on the first ring. For about 2 minutes, she sounded almost human. She told me my father's medical bills were becoming harder to manage. She said the insurance was not covering enough. She said the house might have to be sold if they did not figure something out. I said I was sorry he was sick. I meant that. I would not wish health problems on anyone. But then she kept talking, and every word pulled the mask off a little more. Madison was separating from Derek. Madison needed money for a divorce attorney. Madison needed help finding a place to stay. Madison was emotionally fragile. Madison could not be expected to handle this alone. Then my mother said that since I was doing so well in Chicago, it would be selfish not to help. I asked her how she knew I was doing well. She paused. Apparently, someone had seen my LinkedIn update and told her about my promotion. That almost made me laugh. They could ignore my existence for over a year, but my salary was interesting enough to investigate. My mother said she was not asking for charity. She was asking for family support. I asked if she meant support like the wedding fund that was supposed to support both of us before they spent it on Madison. Silence. Then she said, "That was different." I asked how. She said Madison's wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I said my future was supposed to be once in a lifetime, too. She sighed like I was being difficult and told me I had always kept score. That sentence hit something deep, but not in the way she wanted. I had not kept score. I had survived the score they kept for me. Madison texted me later that day. Long paragraphs, dramatic sentences. She said I had no idea what it was like to have a marriage fall apart. She said I was lucky I got to run away and play independent in Chicago. She said family comes first and that one day I would regret turning my back on blood. She even wrote, "You owe me more than you think." I read that line 3 times. I owed her. The woman who had worn my wedding fund down the aisle now thought I owed her lawyer money. That night, I pulled up old bank records my father had once emailed me by accident when I was still in college. I found the transfers, venue deposit, travel costs, dress payment, hotel block, honeymoon gift, then smaller withdrawals after the wedding, all dressed up in vague family language. Help, support, temporary. I made a folder on my laptop and saved everything, not because I planned to sue them, not because I wanted revenge in some loud, messy way. I saved it because people like my mother love rewriting history, and I was done letting them edit mine. By the end of the week, she asked me to meet in Ohio. She said we needed to talk face to face like adults. I agreed, but not because I was considering giving them money. I agreed because I wanted to look them in the eye when I finally said no. The coffee shop was 3 miles from the house where I grew up. I chose it on purpose because I did not want to step inside that house and let old walls make me feel small. It was one of those local places with wooden tables, chalkboard menus, and college students pretending one latte could carry them through finals. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, and sat where I could see the door. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I had expected anger, maybe sadness, maybe the old panic that used to rise whenever my mother got quiet before she got cruel. But sitting there, in my work coat, with my own money in my own bank account and a return ticket to Chicago already booked, I felt strangely calm. My mother came in first. She looked older than I remembered, but not softer. My father followed behind her, moving slowly, tired in a way that made me feel a brief pinch of sympathy. Madison came last, wearing sunglasses indoors like she wanted everyone to know she had been crying, but did not want anyone to see whether it was real. They sat across from me like this was a business negotiation, and I was the difficult investor. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my mother reached across the table as if she had earned the right to touch my hand. I moved mine before she could. Her face hardened. That was how fast the warmth disappeared. She started by saying she hoped Chicago had not made me cold. I told her Chicago had made me responsible. She ignored that and said my father's bills were serious, Madison's divorce was becoming ugly, and the family was in a position nobody expected. I said I understood the situation. Madison took off her sunglasses and said, "Do you? Because it feels like you're enjoying this." I looked at her carefully. This was the sister my mother had chosen over me again and again. The sister whose wedding had swallowed my future and still left her unhappy. The sister who had never once asked how I felt when I was pushed out of my own family. I told her I was not enjoying anyone's pain. I was just no longer volunteering to pay for it. My mother's mouth tightened. She said that was a cruel thing to say when my father was sitting right there. My father looked down at his coffee and said nothing. That silence used to hurt me. Now it only confirmed what I already knew. My mother went on about sacrifice. She said family's sacrifice, sister's sacrifice, daughter's sacrifice. I asked her why sacrifice had only ever meant me losing something so Madison could have more. Madison snapped that I had always been jealous. I almost smiled, but I did not want to give her the satisfaction of thinking she had reached me. I opened my folder and placed printed pages on the table. Not dramatically, not like a movie. Just one sheet after another. The Miami venue payment, the dress payment, the travel charges, the hotel rooms, the so-called honeymoon gift, the withdrawals after the wedding. I watched my mother recognize them. Her eyes moved fast, then stopped. Madison glanced at the pages and looked away. I said, "This is what you spent from the fund you told me was for both of us." My mother whispered that weddings are expensive. I said, "So is starting over after your own mother kicks you out." People at the next table went quiet. My mother noticed, and for once she looked embarrassed. Not sorry, embarrassed. There is a difference. She lowered her voice and told me not to make a scene. I told her she had made the scene years ago. I was just reading the receipt. Madison started crying then, softly at first, then louder when nobody reacted quickly enough. She said Derek had controlled everything. She said she had nowhere stable to go. She said I had a good job, a good apartment, a good man, and I was punishing her for being loved. That was when I finally said the sentence I had carried all the way from Chicago. "No, Madison, I'm not punishing you for being loved. I'm refusing to keep paying for the way you were favored." My mother shook her head like I was breaking her heart. She said, "After everything we did for you?" That one almost made me laugh. I asked her to name it. One thing. One sacrifice she made for me that she had not turned into a debt. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said I was being disrespectful. I said, "You spent my wedding fund. You tried to take my savings. You called me an ungrateful brat. You threw me out on Thanksgiving weekend, and now you want me to come back as an emergency fund with a heartbeat." My father finally spoke. He said, "Claire, we made mistakes." It was the first time anyone at that table came close to honesty. I looked at him and said, "Then you can live with the cost of them." My mother's eyes filled with anger. She said if I walked away now, I should not expect to have a family left. That threat would have destroyed me 5 years earlier. At that table, it sounded empty. I told her I had stopped having a family the night she made my place in it, conditional on my money. Then I stood up. Madison reached for my sleeve and said, "You owe me." I pulled my arm back and said, "I do not owe you my savings, my wedding, my peace, or one more year of my life." My mother said my name sharply, the way she used to when she expected me to freeze. I did not freeze. I picked up my coat, left enough cash for my coffee, and looked at all 3 of them one last time. "I stopped being your backup plan the night you threw me out." Then I walked out. No slammed door, no screaming, no shaking hands. Just cold Ohio air, my phone lighting up with messages I did not answer, and the cleanest silence I had ever heard. After that meeting, the truth did what truth usually does when people have spent years burying it. It found air. I did not post about them. I did not send a dramatic group message. I did not need to. My mother did that herself. She called relatives trying to get ahead of the story, explaining that I had become selfish, that Chicago had changed me, that I refused to help my sick father and abandoned Madison in her darkest hour. But my mother had one problem. She had never been able to complain quietly. The more she talked, the more details came out. Then one aunt asked a simple question in the family group chat. "Wait, what happened to the wedding fund?" That was the first loose thread. Another relative remembered my mother bragging about Madison's Miami wedding. Someone else mentioned the honeymoon. Someone asked if I had received my half. My mother tried to dodge it, but by then Madison was angry, stressed, and careless. She snapped back that everyone was acting like she had stolen something when our parents had offered. That was all it took. Suddenly the story was not about me refusing to help. It was about my parents emptying a fund meant for 2 daughters and handing one daughter almost everything. For the first time in my life, people who had smiled through my mother's favoritism had to say it out loud. It was not normal. It was not fair. It was not family love. It was financial favoritism dressed up as tradition. Madison's divorce became final months later, and the perfect life she had posted online disappeared almost overnight. Derek had protected more of his assets than she expected, and the debts connected to her spending did not vanish just because the marriage did. She moved back to Ohio first, then moved in temporarily with a cousin when my parents' house became too tense. The lifestyle content stopped. The smiling beach photos vanished. The captions about blessings and dream homes were replaced by silence. My father's bills kept coming, and the house that had once been used as proof that my parents had done everything right went on the market. They did not lose it in one dramatic moment. They sold it because they had to. Medical costs, debt, bad refinancing options, and years of treating Madison's wants like emergencies finally caught up with them. My mother cried when the sale sign went up. I heard that from a relative I had not blocked yet. She said my mother kept saying she never thought things would end this way. I believed that. People like my mother rarely imagine consequences reaching their own front porch. They imagine consequences as something other people carry. I blocked the last few relatives after that because every update felt like someone trying to hand me a bill written in guilt instead of dollars. I did not attend the house closing. I did not visit Madison. I did not send money. I did not send a speech either. My silence was not revenge for the sake of cruelty. It was protection. There is a kind of peace you only get when you stop explaining your boundaries to people committed to crossing them. A year later, I married Ethan in Chicago. It was small, warm, and completely paid for by us. No ocean view, no designer performance, no mother turning the aisle into a stage for her pride. Just a little venue with brick walls, white flowers, close friends, good food, and vows that made me feel steady instead of displayed. I walked down the aisle knowing every dollar behind that day had been earned honestly. I thought I might feel sad that my family was not there. Instead, I felt clear. That surprised me more than anything. I had spent so many years believing family was something you had to keep even when it hurt you. But that is not love. Love does not ask you to destroy your future to prove loyalty. Love does not call you ungrateful for protecting what you earned. Love does not spend your dreams on someone else and then demand your savings when the applause runs out. What I learned is simple, but it took me years to believe it. Boundaries are not revenge. Self-respect is not cruelty. Financial responsibility is not selfishness. And walking away from people who only value you when they need you can be the most educational lesson of your life. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is not ruining anyone's life. It is refusing to let them ruin yours. So tell me in the comments, if your own family used guilt to take from you, would you forgive them, help them, or choose your peace and walk away?